Stefanos, you are a hard man to get a hold of. You are everywhere all at once. I love your Instagram. I've been waiting for this conversation. I am so excited to introduce you to this audience because I know that they need your information. They need your direct input on how relationships are going wrong. I love your take in particular about men needing to be loved for who they are. That's a big part of the conversation right now going on online about men not being loved for who they are or they don't feel that they are. Let's dive into that. But first, could you tell the audience a little bit about you so that they know exactly who they're dealing with here? Because you are quite the impressive guy.
No, thanks. That was a very kind introduction, man. I appreciate that. I've been in personal transformation space, teaching, leading, coaching, etc. for 24 years. Backgrounds in psychology, developmental psych, trauma, inner child development, somatics, and various mind-body modalities as well that I've just sort of picked up along the way and continue to study, nervous system regulation being a big part of that, really understanding how our physiology plays a part in our relationships and how being a regulated human being can actually improve and enhance our lives, and just really supporting people, I guess, reconnect to themselves, man, find themselves again. We lose ourselves so much along the way, wearing different masks and trying to appease and impress others, and we just forget who we are. So now I spend a lot of my time helping, successful, well-accomplished individuals find real and true happiness beyond just their success, right? The successes that they've created externally in the world. And a big part of that is our relationships. The quality of our relationships determine the quality of the lives that we live. And, I'm no stranger to that, what I perceive to be deep truth either. I live that every day. I experience struggles like everyone else, and really wanting to, I just have a passion and a deep, I would say, maybe it's an infatuation with, optimizing the human potential, the human self, and relationships particularly. I really feel that's what my next book is about. I feel that relationships are a pathway to touching God, being God, just really expanding ourselves as humans, growing.
Love it. This is going to play really well here on this group because, hey, audience, everybody out there, we have a couple of big groups in our audience that really come to this channel over and over. One is, and I'm very glad for this, a lot of very kind-hearted and motivated women who are not bitter, not resentful. They are trying with everything they have to understand usually the man in their life that they love. This is a big attachment channel. Obviously, I'm the attachment specialist. We focus a lot on attachment theory. They've been learning about the update to attachment theory I've been bringing out over the last couple of months to really revolutionize and change it for the 21st century because it needs an update and a facelift. They're learning about their relationship dynamics, and they want to understand more about the men in their life. That is the biggest factor that they've really told me here on this channel. The second group to that we see a lot of is men who are wanting to understand themselves. They're wanting to understand, why do I keep doing these things in relationships? Why am I losing the love of my life over and over and over? Why am I frustrated with me at the end of the day? And why can't I get myself to stop saying these things that are sabotaging my relationships? There's other groups that are listening, but these are primarily the two biggest groups that I talk to most of the time, and they talk right back in the comments. So I'm sure there's going to be a million comments and a million questions after this episode here at the bottom. Would you open up a little bit with us and share with us about the man maybe that you used to be? I know your story is tremendous, and you've come from some incredible places, and that really, I want the women in the audience to understand that you're not just some stuffed shirt coming on talking about things he's learned in an ivory tower. You've actually lived this battle.
Yeah, I think in part, man, I continue to live this battle, and what I mean by that is, and I'll just be very transparent. I think at different life stages will give us different opportunities to either heal or look at or work with or be with or attend to more fragile parts of ourselves. And what I specifically mean by that is I'm recently, and when I say recently, 2.5 years into being a parent and being a father, and the stuff that has been arising to the surface of my awareness over the last 2.5 years isn't necessarily anything new about myself. And I'm not saying that I know everything about myself. I don't. However, the stuff that's coming up, some of the patterns, the reactive patterns, even, you're talking about attachment. Part of my attachment style I would like to say was, and can still flare up, is more disorganized attachment style. And so I can see the parts of me that are wanting to run and wanting to avoid not so much just conflict, but wanting to avoid the difficulty of what my situation may be presenting to me at any given moment. And what I've noticed the last couple of years is some of these old patterns that I've really dealt with multiple times in my life, relationship patterns tethered to my father, tethered to my mother, tethered to my familial environment. I've dealt with them. I've worked with them at different life stages in my life. And most recently, as I reflect back now, I thought to myself, man, I've looked at this in my early 20s. I remember looking at this in my late 20s. I remember looking at this in my early 30s. I remember looking at this in my late 30s. And now in my early 40s, I'm 42, I'm looking at it again. I'm being with it again. And so I can either ignore it and I can pretend it doesn't exist, and I can drown myself in, you name the addiction, you name the pattern, you name the compensation, right? Alcohol, drugs, work, whatever it may be, being valued in the world, or I can really deal with this stuff, right? And so I'm in it right now. I'm in it. I don't want to shy away from what's arising. I'm noticing reactive patterns of aggression, patterns of impatience, patterns of even not feeling adequate enough as a father. Like, am I really doing it right? Am I making a great impression on her nervous system? How am I imprinting upon her, my little daughter? Like all these questions. How am I supporting my wife during the process?
Doesn't that hit so hard? I've got 5 kids of myself, and what I have found is knowledge brings more fear than anything. Because that question you just asked, am I imprinting properly on her nervous system? That's questions I ask myself about my 5 kids. I'm looking at them like, I wonder what your nervous system is doing right now. Have I shaped it properly? Should I buy you another ice cream cone, or should I take you on a trip to Hawaii? What do we need to do next? And it's the more you understand about how these systems work, the more you want to shape them with all of your heart. It sounds like that's a battle as a father you're winning right now too.
Yeah, well, I feel I'm losing sometimes, and it's sometimes in our losses that if we're open enough to those losses, they actually become catalysts for walking a path that leads us to winning, so to speak, which means not conquering or changing even, but transforming the relationship to these maybe maladaptive or unhealthy patterns, right? And so, when you ask a little bit about my past, I grew up in a very violent, volatile, uncertain environment, very difficult environment for me. One where there was emotional and physical abuse constantly, and there was also love. It was very confusing, hence the disorganized attachment style as an example, just to speak your language, right? And from there developed patterns of addiction around food, around hiding, around people pleasing, and then that led it into, as I became older and stepped into the essence of masculinity and manhood, and just became an young adult and a teenager with a lot moving through me physiologically, that turned very quickly into reactivity and aggression, alcoholism, and all of those things. And then I would seek validation largely through accolades, through physical performance. So, physical competition, sporting competition, etc. But I was very overweight as a child, but then as a teenager started to lose that weight and started to come into that and started to see how people would appreciate me through these accolades, and they became patterns of addiction. Validation through sex, through cheating. Well, not so much cheating, but it was the sex. It was the being validated by other women. It was be with us, novelty and variety, essentially, right? And whether I was in a relationship or I wasn't in a relationship, and anytime I got really close and we started to hit emotional depths in the relationship, my body would feel like, whoa, what's going on here? Feelings of annihilation, get out. And how I would get out was to cheat, because I wasn't really courageous enough to say, oh, I'm going to end the relationship.
Well, let's stick with this for a minute, because a lot of the women here on this channel, this is exactly what brings them here in the first place. They've got a man who's got maybe a little bit more avoidant tendencies, who's fearful of that connection. He doesn't understand the emotional intimacy. It's terrifying to him. It's alien. It's alluring, but it's also confusing. And he pulls away. He cheats. And many of the women here, they come in blaming themselves. They come in saying, what did I do wrong? They're not even here to rage against him. They're actually here to try to understand. And they've come from a place of compassion. Can you speak to them a little bit? What is it? Is it their fault? Is it his fault? Is it what is maybe the factor that leads a man like this to cheat in those regards? And how did you turn around into a man who does not ever want to cheat again?
Yeah. So firstly, it's never anyone's, it's never anyone's fault. Let's just say that. That doesn't mean that people cannot take responsibility and they're not responsible for their actions. But we'll move away from the language, and this isn't a criticism to you, Adam, at all, but more so for the dialogue, the inner dialogue that people have is, well, it's my fault. What did I do wrong?
I was hoping you would go there, because that's very true.
Yeah. Yeah, and I sense that that's what you were getting at as well. And so it's not anyone's fault. So let's remove that language first, right? Now, are you responsible for someone else's actions? No, you're not. Even if you did something that was malicious and intentional and you even conspired for them to, I hope they cheat on me. I hope they do this thing. I'm going to set it all up so they do. Even then, if they cheat on you, it's still their choice. Yes, they're influenced, maybe. Yes, they're deeply manipulated, maybe, but it's still their choice. So you've got to be responsible for you. Now, when we're talking about responsibility, and this may be something that people don't want to hear, again, like I'm really distinct though, it's not your fault that that person cheated. It is not your responsibility that they cheated. You are not responsible for their actions. And you're both feeding into the dynamic. Your complementary, unresolved, unprocessed wounding and patterns are playing with each other and dancing with each other and are stimulating something within you and something within him. In this instance. And here we will fall back to our reactive patterns if they're unresolved and unprocessed, especially if we're unaware, and we will do what we always do to find some level of reprieve. And in this instance, that man is cheating, not to hurt you, more than likely not to hurt you. I'm almost certain that it's not to hurt you. It's an escapism. It's an addiction. It's a habit. It's a pattern within him. It has less to do with you and more to do with him. And you may say, well, he's never cheated on anyone before, and that could be true. Again, more to do with him and less to do with you. And it's showing up now in this way. It's shown up in a different way before. And so the opportunity that we have if we're cheated on, as an example, and if I'm speaking to a woman now that's been cheated on and has this avoidant man or has a pattern of attracting avoidant men, that's the insight. Okay, what is it about me that's attracting this kind of man? Again, it's not your fault. It's not about that. There's something within you, though, that is unresolved, that is attracting this kind of dynamic. Now, why are we attracting dynamics that are repetitive but also hurtful to us? Because it's an opportunity for a redo. And because that thing is unresolved and unprocessed, literally in our body, so the trauma loop's not closed physiologically, and psychologically and relationally, we're attached to a set of beliefs or an imprint about self that doesn't make sense or that is less than. So our worth is low. And in order to reinforce that sense of unworthiness, as an example, or not enoughness, we will attract circumstances that reinforce that. Well, guess what? Being cheated on is a pretty strong indicator that we're not enough, that it's our fault, that we don't matter, that we're not important. However, the opportunity is to break that imprint, not only by choosing a more empowered choice within that relational dynamic, so healthy boundaries, healthy internal boundaries, healthy external limits, but also recognizing that there's another way to attract another human and it lives within you and it comes from a different place. So I'll pause there.
100%. I love this. I love the distinction between it as nobody's fault, because that's very, very true. And yet we can and should take responsibility for the choices we've made. And also we need to look at our own patterns. The vast majority of couples who come into me for coaching, and I was just for reference, I was a licensed marriage and family therapist for many years, jumped into coaching now, focused on attachment. In particular, I keep getting couples coming in who have affairs, and the woman is haunted by this question of what did I not do, or what did I do? Why not me? Why them? And the man keeps coming back and saying, look, they meant nothing. They meant nothing. And he means it. And he says it with every ounce of sincerity he has. And she says, how could that possibly be true? If they meant nothing, you would have just come to me. And it's this massive disconnect between even what sex is, even dopamine through sexual experiences, instead of maybe oxytocin bonding through sexual experiences with a partner, with a loved one. A lot of times I found it seems like men are running away from the oxytocin bonding. And like you said, escapism, dumping into that dopamine experience. It sounds like that's definitely something you've had before and you've experienced before, but you probably work with a lot of men like this. Do you buy this? And I do, but I'd love to hear your take. When a man says, this meant nothing to me, you are the person I care about. Yes, I cheated, but it means nothing. When he's saying that, what do you think he's actually trying to tell her?
A number of different things, right? So firstly, the first thing he's attempting to convey, and I don't think he even knows this, and I'd say a lot of this, what I'm about to share, is unconscious, is that he almost, because there's various components, I think, to the human condition, right? So, and they're not, we'll speak to them in separate ways, but they're all interconnected. So there's the biological aspect of us as humans, which we all have a drive for reproduction, male or female, it's irrelevant, right? Like we all this biological drive to reproduce, and that's associated with the physical act of sex. And so in men specifically, the hormonal cocktail that we have, and this isn't to say that women don't have these urges either, but you've also got to look at societal expectations and societal conditioning. That's another layer and factor as well. You've also got to look at the way we interact with our own emotional bodies, how men and women interact differently with their own emotional selves. Social pressures as well is another factor. But our drive to feel significant as men and to also just procreate is very, very high within us. Again, I want to be very clear. It's high within every human. So there's that part. It's like this tussling that a man has with his animal body and his spiritual self, if you like, right? And there's a disconnect there for so many men. They have very little control over their animalistic faculties. And again, not making excuses for that. Now let's go deeper. That's a sort of a surface level, not explanation, but a surface level, I wouldn't even say reason, but condition, right? If you like. And again, the condition isn't exclusive to all men. Then you've got the unprocessed, unresolved aspect of us as humans. Most of us, if not all of us, experience some expression or affliction of trauma. And how that lands in our nervous systems and how that lands in our bodies as children or as young people developing can often be very challenging. And what we do is we compartmentalize really well as humans. And so couple that with big boys don't cry, as an example, with men aren't really taught and told and shown how to be with emotional expression, or even just somatic expression for that, like deliberate somatic expression, like really tethering a release, an emotional release practice or a trauma release practice with the thing internally that they're experiencing psychologically. You have a bit of a recipe for disaster there. And more importantly, the greater the pain that we experience, the greater the pleasure we require to mitigate the pain. And for most people, it's either food, drugs, alcohol, sex, success, money. They're just very common avenues, places that we'll go to seek that pleasure. And it's often an unconscious pain that we're feeling, but it's so uncomfortable. We can't name it. We can't label it. We don't feel safe enough to express it because so many of us feel isolated. If we're speaking about men, there is an epidemic of isolation amongst men. Men feeling they can't trust other men. They're alone with their own feelings. They don't know what to do with those feelings. So they put it into the external. And again, you couple that with just not knowing what to do with that pain, they go straight to pleasure. Now, intimate relationships can bring up, especially if you're going in there, quote unquote, broken. No one's broken, no one's fractured. But if you believe you're fractured, if you believe you're broken, if you're going into a relationship and entering a relationship, not really knowing yourself and just looking for something to fill the void or hoping that you'll find something in the other person that will fulfill you, like codependency is an example of that. You're going to very soon after that, the moment you start deepening in intimacy, whatever that may look like, whether it's through challenge, whether it's through making deeper commitments to each other, whether it's being seen for the first time in a very particular way that's very shocking to you and very scary, but you yearn for it, but you push it away because it's, hey, I don't think I'm worth it. I don't think it's worth my partner looking at me in that way. I'll speak for myself. I very quickly mistook the peak experience of orgasm and novelty and variety in sexual encounters for deep intimacy. It's not that though. It's a form of intimacy for sure, but it's not the depth of intimacy that I was actually craving. The depth of intimacy that I was craving, I was simultaneously super scared of. And most men will face that paradigm, and they'll live with that. And they'll go to distraction, whether it's spending more time with their friends, whether it's building businesses, whether it's getting involved in hobbies or whatever it may be, it's just anything but actually deepening into the relationship.
Because it feels like terror. That is terror. That's your sympathetic nervous system has cataloged intimate relationships as unsafe or risky or dangerous. Because in your earliest relationships, you got hurt, you got wounded, you got scared and terrified out of your mind. So now when you touch that area, you could have an oxytocin phobic response where you experience terror and fear at the bonding of oxytocin, or you may not even know how to activate that because you've been stuck so chronically in your sympathetic nervous system activation state that coming out of that even feels horrible because now you're afraid you're going to get hurt because you're not on guard enough. And that right there seems like the biggest flashpoint I see for most men. If we take the most common avoidant man and anxious woman dynamic, he has no idea she's trying to immerse him into his parasympathetic bonding system, rest, digest, vagus nerve stimulation, all the oxytocin. He has no experience for that. So I liken it to she's trying to offer him a delicious meal of a big cooked beef steak on the table, and all he hears is beef, and he thinks, well, I've had beef before, gas station hot dogs. I don't want a gas station hot dog, and I'm certainly not paying $500 for a gas station hot dog. And he leaves because he thinks she's offering minimal. He thinks she's offering a little bit of a dopamine in exchange for all this intimacy, all this commitment, all this financial burden, marriage, paperwork. He thinks she's offering him nothing but gas station hot dogs when she's trying to put everything on the table. That's the biggest experience I see. So then he runs away to eat the relationship equivalent of a gas station hot dog, which, surprise, surprise, is a hookup. It's Tinder. It's going to your ex for 5 minutes or 3 hours, whatever it might be. That satisfaction, though, it dies pretty fast. What happens to a man after? What happens to a man after he has that sexual binge experience? What is the experience afterward? When everything, you get up, you towel off, you put on your pants, what happens next?
Guilt, shame, repeat. Not just the guilt, the shame, repeat the experience, because now you've got guilt and shame laid upon the original pain that you don't want to feel. And what you're speaking to, Adam, is that ultimately intimacy was unsafe. The oxytocin bonding came with conditions, right? Generally from our primary caregivers. It came with conditions that put a lot of pressure on us as children. And that sense of relating continues to play out in our adult relationships. And this is the unresolved, unprocessed stuff I'm talking about. Right. This is what my very deep guess is, that you help people untether from these deep attachment wounds. Right. I do the same thing, maybe in a slightly different way, because they keep playing out in our adult relationships. Now, back to your original question a moment ago around what happens next. And I said, guilt, shame, repeat. That is a vicious cycle, man. And then what also comes with that is, I should say, guilt, shame, hide, repeat. We keep hiding ourselves as men. Now we're checking our phones a little more. Now we're giving our phones a little less to our partners. Now we're not telling them all the details. Now we're starting little white lies. It compounds. Parallels are drawn in every area of our life. Now we embellish. Now we exaggerate. Now we become untrustworthy. Now we're aloof in the relationship. And that woman feels that. Her intuitive nervous system feels that. And it impacts her. Now what happens? You've got your reactive patterns playing out in relationship unknowingly. She is going to play out her reactive patterns. And if she's anxious, as you mentioned earlier as an example, well, guess what she's going to do? She's going to cling more. She's going to put more pressure on. And guess what that's going to do for you? It's going to give you the perfect reason and the perfect excuse to go look for those gas station hot dogs.
That's it. And this right here is the frustration of so many women on this channel, is they know that something's off. They try to bring it up to him. They use that sensory data from their emotions and say, hey, I'm sensing something is off. And he goes, you are crazy and there's something wrong with you and I'm not going to listen to you anymore. This conversation is over. And all that does is deepen that divide between them. So she watches. I talk about the Grecian myth of Cassandra, who was blessed by the god Apollo to have perfect prophecies, and then cursed when she rejected him so that no one would ever believe her perfect prophecies. And this seems to be what a lot of anxiously attached women in particular in relationships experience, is they know what's happening and they feel what's happening. And yes, their paranoia makes it worse at some times, but they know what's going on and they're told you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, until the day he comes to her and says, look, all right, I got to be honest with you. I have cheated on you. How many times? 5 times. How many people? 4 different people. One was my ex. One was your friend. And now it's blown up in her face and she's known all along something was wrong. Now, not only in the future is it hard for her to trust him, but it's hard for her to even trust herself because now she's allowed so many things to go so wrong. And this is one thing I loved one of your Instagram reels you had recently talking about when women really reach an end state and they say no, they have enough. It's because they've betrayed their own internal sense of self. They've betrayed their own internal understanding of their feelings and their world, and they have to forgive themselves first. Talk to us a little bit. Talk to the ladies out there, Rami, who need to forgive themselves first before she can even think of forgiving somebody else or being re-intimate in a relationship. What maybe can you tell them to soothe that wound in their heart of I never listened to me and it got me hurt?
You've got to grieve the pain around that. For me, forgiveness is fruitless without feeling. And so if you cannot truly feel the pain surrounding your life circumstances and what's happened to you and your past and the choices that you've made, and you berate yourself and you're attempting to be a perfectionist in your own life and you struggle to forgive yourself, if it's verbal or intellectual, you're just placating yourself. You have to grieve. You have to grieve the choices that you've made. You have to grieve the parents and the primary caregivers that you never had. You have to grieve the circumstances that were imprinted upon you that really moved you towards a direction of choosing men that don't serve you and never really choosing yourself, or very seldomly choosing yourself. So there needs to be a feeling, a grieving, a visceral sadness, and everything that's involved with grief, the anger, the frustration, the disbelief, the avoidance, all of it. The I don't believe this is true. If you don't feel, you'll never get to a place of forgiveness. And the trick is with that is to not feel in a silo or an echo chamber or in isolation, but it's to feel in the presence of healthy individuals relationally. This is the social neuroscience of relating, if you like, right? And this is where us as people have an opportunity to be witnessed by others that are non-judgmental and compassionate, that can help us rewrite, rewire, restructure our nervous systems, and that can give us inspiration and intelligent hope to go within and say, oh, wow, I can express this very difficult thing and be witnessed in this and not be judged and be met with compassion and be really loved through this. That's deeply healing. And that's where I would start with respect to forgiveness. And look, it's a lot. If it sounds like a lot, it is a lot. And on the other side of that is a deep freedom that leads to authentic, deep connection and intimacy.
I love this. I love this because so many of the women here on this channel, I've been amazed, honestly, by the audience. Most times when you go on the internet, you read about relationship pieces, you go in the comment sections, and it's a lot of anger. It's a lot of hate. That's a lot of, spit on this guy. I hate that guy. Let's bash on men, or let's bash on women if it's the men involved. And I've been very blessed in this community as everybody focuses very strongly on, okay, how do I love more? How do I love more? How do I give more? How do I have compassion for this person who's hurt me? And that has really touched my heart. A lot of these women have a hard time having compassion on themselves. It's not even the man they need to forgive. It's themselves first. And then they say, okay, he's had this affair, right? Maybe through your words, they've understood a little bit more about what he's feeling. I want to make sure that we don't just tell these women, okay, trust him. And I know we won't. I know you won't, especially. Don't, trust him. It'll be okay. He's open with you. No. How can these women, maybe he's come to them and said, hey, look, I did this thing. I don't ever want to do this thing again. I'd like to make things right. I'd like to fix things with you. What are some signs she can look for, or some indicators that his heart has really changed, that he's not a man who's going to go out there binging pleasure anymore to avoid his pain? He's not going to betray her trust in that way through escapism. What tells a woman that a man is legitimately changed and ready to move forward into the man that he needs to be?
There's two things, in my opinion, that tells a woman that a man has changed or is changing. And there's many more, of course, but let's start with these two. The first one, in no particular order, the first one is doing his own inner work. He's demonstrating that he's doing his own inner work. That means he could be working with a therapist. He's working somatically, experientially, therapeutically, all the different ways emotionally with his wounds, with his patterns. And as a result of that, he's creating not only more awareness, but he's taking action on making changes in his life, which leads to the second piece, which really this is probably a byproduct of the first, of doing your own inner work, is consistency. Consistency in his behavior, consistency in how he's showing up, really understands his patterns, has an ability to take ownership, responsibility, apologize, behaves, acts, thinks, feels, and speaks differently in his world. So he's really committed to the change that he's saying he wants to make, and there's consistent evidence of that consistently over time. But that inner work piece is everything. And so it's one thing to say, it's lip service to say, hey, I really want to change. I'm going to change. Take me back, forgive me, etc. Great. But what are you doing to show that? And for yourself. So again, if a couple came to me and that was a situation, I would very, very clearly look at the man, either in our individual session or in our couple session. I would say, do not do this for her. Do not do this for the relationship. Do this for you first and foremost. Do you want to change? Don't bullshit yourself. Don't bullshit the relationship or her. Do you want to change? Are you willing to look at yourself and what has actually caused you to cause or, disharmony and disconnect in your own life and dishonesty in your own life, to live out of integrity with a closed heart in your own life? Because that's courage. That's the hero's journey. Are you willing to walk that path? Yes, for your partner. Yes, I love that. And for your family and for your marriage. And that's admirable. But are you willing to do it for yourself? And can you bring in along the way all the versions of you that have been really hurt and face that and feel what was unfelt in moments of distress and pain and trauma and challenge in your life? Because that's the shit you've been avoiding for a very long time. And if that man is doing that and he's doing his inner work around that, then it's up to you as an individual whether you want to take him back. Because you won't actually be taking him back if he's doing his inner work. You'll be taking a new version of him back. And you'll be actually both of you entering into a new relationship. And with that said, it's important that that woman is doing her own inner work as well. Because she doesn't want to bring the old versions of herself in that relationship again either.
This is true. There's a process called differentiation. I know you're familiar with it, but to the audience at home, differentiation means you separate the old person in your brain from the new person, and you catalog them as separate individuals. Now, for that to happen, one main piece that I would add to your component there is the way he speaks. His character needs to be transforming. It's not enough to say, I want to change for you, for our marriage, for us. It has to be, I am actively repulsed by the man that I have been for the choices I've made. I do not like the choices I've made. I do not like the lack of discipline. You don't have to hate yourself, but you dislike where you have been and you refuse to be there anymore. One thing I like to say is that women usually change for love. How can I love you better? Men tend to change for pain, especially how can I make sure I don't fail you anymore? Men change to resolve problems. Women change to increase intimacy, typically. Largest driving force. So if he needs to be experiencing pain that is consistent in himself instead of pain she is inflicting upon him temporarily, that's a temporary short-term change that he's going to give you flowers and chocolates and diamond necklaces. But the internal pain is, I can never go back. So that's number one. And the second piece, I agree with you, doing his own work. I would say he has to be changing outside the relationship. If his changes are located solely inside your relationship and he's changing silently alone in the home and not telling anyone about it, not getting a mentor, a coach, a priest, a therapist, whoever it might be, if he's not externalizing at all and certainly not opening up in his personal relationships with his brother, with his friend, with people at church or people that wherever he is, that he is getting accountability, and especially from other men, he needs to be driving that outside the relationship. You can only trust a man who has broadcast to the world who he's going to be so that the pressure and pain are in him and in his community. A woman cannot be actively trying to change a man and be his mom, because that never works. It's exhausting for her, and that's how you go backwards 15 times. To the men, actually. Let's talk to the men at home. I feel like we beat up on them a little bit here on this episode, and I don't want to too much. But they're guys, they're tough, they can take it. For those men who are standing at that precipice, who are looking at the men they've used to be and the men they've been, and saying, I don't know if there's a better man in me. I don't know if I can be better. I am so tired. I'm so exhausted. I've never seen better. No one has supported me. What would you say to those men as they maybe consider taking that launch into manhood?
Is it completely true? All the things that you've just said as a man, is it completely true? Is it really true? Is it really, really true? Is it really, really, really true? Take a leaf from Byron Katie's book for a moment. Is it really, really true? Everything you're saying about yourself, is it really true? Is there no example of, in part, of a man that you would like to be somewhere in the world? I hear you. You know, your dad wasn't that for you. Your grandfather wasn't that for you. Your brothers weren't that for you. I get it. I get it. I get the pain that you've experienced. We've all experienced pain in different ways, not wanting to minimize your pain, not wanting to take your pain away in any capacity. And you can wallow and stay in your pain and in the disbelief that there is a healthy version of masculinity or man out there, or you can create that for yourself. You can find it. You can, as John DeMartini says, look for the traits of the greats and emulate them in yourself. And the only reason you can even notice them in anyone else is because they live within you in some capacity. You just haven't accessed them fully yet, that's all. And so I don't think that's completely true. In very rare situations is someone not able to come back into wholeness, not able to remember their wholeness, not able to remember their value and their worthiness, in very, very few cases. So sure, you could be a man that falls into that category. The likelihood that you are is not. So the journey is, the juice is worth the squeeze, in my opinion. And you may just find something out about yourself and make some really meaningful changes that give you neurological, physiological, intellectual, emotional, spiritual reprieve and spaciousness, that you can actually make some deeper changes in your life. And actually attract, you touched on something, Adam, that is something that I touched on earlier in a different way around loneliness. And you touched on the importance of accountability and having men in your life as a man. If you don't, you are at a tremendous disservice as a man. There's an author, you may know of him, Jack Donovan. He speaks to, he's awesome, man. I've read all his books. I think he's fantastic in the way that he communicates the importance of men needing men, amidst many other things that he states around masculinity and manhood and so forth. But the importance of men being validated by other men, healthy men, having healthy men in your life that keep you accountable, that challenge you healthily, but that also bring out the best in you and want the best for you. It's something that is missing in modern society so much. Again, I mentioned this earlier, it's an epidemic of loneliness when it comes to us as men, and we just don't know what to do with that. We compartmentalize it, and we need other men in our lives helping us raise up and helping us be greater versions of ourselves, while also saying, hey, calling you forward on that, you can do better.
Most men are out desperately searching for a girlfriend when what they actually need is a really good male friend. And they hope a girlfriend will be like a Band-Aid over a gunshot wound, but the actual healing is your brothers, the men around you, the men that will uplift you, the men who are better than you. I remember my life really didn't turn around until I started working around and spending time with men who were better than me. Quite frankly, men who were smarter than me, faster than me, ripped, wealthy. They were further in a career. They were just better than me. And sometimes the shame of not being as good as them drove me to do better, but sometimes just absorbing the lessons from them, or a gentle call out at something I wasn't doing right, or the advice I got from them, solutions that were available in that network. It transformed me as a human being. And it was fundamental to everything I've become now. I could not be the man I am today, not without women in my life, but frankly, without men in my life. I agree with you. The research shows that about 2/3 of men now report loneliness every single day. And a large portion of that is not because he doesn't have a girlfriend. It's because he doesn't have friends. Most men today actually report that a friend seems almost unthinkable to them. They don't even know how to make friends. To those guys out there who are that lonely, what do you recommend they do to go make, not a girlfriend, but to go make some guy friends, to connect to some men? What should they be doing?
I think it's important, and this is something that Jack Donovan speaks to in different ways, but mastery, right? And so I think it's really, really important that us as men are creative with our hands, but just creative full stop. I think I'm laughing because I know what I'm about to say. I think the ultimate creatrix is woman. She gives birth. And at least a woman has the capacity to give birth. Men don't have that beautiful divine birthright. And I think in some ways we compensate with all the things that we've created externally in the world, right, as men, okay? And so I'm sort of laughing at that. But it's also important on the other side of that. It's important that we are creating. And so I would say to men that feel lonely, do things that interest you. So for example, you may be athletic, right? And you may go play basketball or pickleball, or that seems to be a phenomenon that's taking over the US, or tennis or whatever it is. Just go play some sports, go join a gym, right? Maybe you're interested in pottery or building bows and arrows. And I actually like go to, there's, in most places, most major metropolitan places, there's I remember back in Australia, there was something called the men's shed where there'd be a bunch of retirees there and they're just woodworking and making stuff. And as a man, you could go there and just spend time with other men, right? So maybe that's what you're interested in doing, making furniture. You do what feels good for you or what you're interested in, and then find other people, other men that are doing the same thing. And it can be anything. It can be pottery. It doesn't matter what it is, right? And it could be collecting stamps. So join your local stamp collecting club. Just start to be in the presence of other men. Now, caveat to that, I totally get how being in the presence of other men can be very triggering and activating, especially for so many men who have not had positive or healthy father figures or have had abusive father figures. It can be very triggering to be in the presence of another man because they have such deep trust issues and brother wounds with men. And so just being in the physical presence in, sharing in intimate containers and doing things that you love and exposing more of yourself, that happens naturally when you're spending time with another, can be really confronting. Let's revert back to what both Adam and I have shared around speak to a priest, a therapist, a coach, be part of something where you have an opportunity. It could be AA, doesn't matter what it is, where you have an opportunity to express yourself in a safe, non-judgmental place that helps you deal with these things as they arise. There's nothing wrong with needing help. There's nothing wrong with optimizing yourself as a human. If you've got some stuff that you're working through that doesn't feel resolved within you, you're not weak, you're not a piece of shit, you're not wrong, you're not a detriment to the world. But you will be if you allow it to fester, actually. You will be if you don't address it. But if you address it, guess what? You move through it. You face it. That's courage. Brené Brown speaks this around vulnerability, right? Some of the toughest guys I know need to, when you look at the qualities of vulnerability, need to practice vulnerability in order to accomplish their mission or their task. And she speaks a lot more articulately than I can, especially with military men, right? And operators who I've happened to work a lot with, very blessed to, and, some of the toughest guys on the planet. And on a side note, a lot of these guys as well really struggle to look at their interior selves, their emotional selves. And, the compensatory pattern or strategy is let me conquer the physical world. Let me be regarded as the toughest in the world as well. And at the same time, without knowing it, they're practicing deep intimacy and vulnerability by relying on other men to survive and the qualities that are associated with that. So two points I was making there, but you've got to follow what interests you and choose to put yourself in uncomfortable situations with other men and slowly cultivate and deepen your intimacy with other men.
I agree with that in a great way. We're just talking about Jack Donovan, his book, The Way of Men, great book. Another great book that I'm wondering if you're familiar with is David Brooks's book, The Second Mountain, which talks about in men. Okay. Yeah, this is a good one. I just came across this one more recently. It posits the idea that men climb two mountains in their lives. The first is wealth, status, fame, fortune, getting really ripped and jacked, being the strongest man on the planet, killing a lion with your bare hands. And at a certain point, you reach the pinnacle of what you can achieve solo as a man. And that's your mountain. And then you come down the other side into a valley. And you start to dip and you start to wonder, what is the purpose? What is the meaning? Why am I always running into pleasure and escapism? Why am I unhappy? Why am I lonely? Even with all these accomplishments. And I work with plenty of C-suite executives, business owners, men at the top of their game, $100 million fortunes or more. And they say, I have never felt so alone and so unfulfilled. And they plunge in that valley and then they look up. And they realize there's a second mountain to climb. And the second mountain, so in the book, what Brooks calls it is service to others. But it's really legacy. It's meaning. It's purpose. It's human impact. It could be your children, the people you mentor, the demographic you change, an invention spread out into the world to make life better, peace on earth, whatever it is, your service to others, your legacy. This is the second mountain. The way you climb the first mountain determines how much weight you're going to have strapped to your back against you as you try to climb that second mountain. You may have to cut some of that weight off. You may have to cut off the shame, the guilt, the people you've hurt, maybe your kids that you've alienated. You need to repair some relationships there first. Maybe your wife that you've treated badly, all the 15 ex-girlfriends, maybe the friends that you've thrown away, maybe just being isolated from everybody as you race through this cutthroat industry. But the second mountain is really the target of your life. It is what defines you as a man. So every man out there listening right now, your second mountain is coming. You may be looking up at it right now, wondering how to climb it, or you may still be on the top of that first mountain thinking, I'm king of the world and I don't have to change myself. Maybe the woman in your life is making you listen to this podcast right now saying, hey, get the message. The second mountain comes for everybody, and you need to be prepared for it because it's the real purpose of your life. What have you seen? What have you seen when men go to hit that second mountain? What is the biggest thing they need to take with them to win on that second mountain, that legacy, that drive, the family, the whatever that purpose is? What does he need to do right now to be ready for that second mountain?
We often believe because we enter unfamiliar terrain and we're tackling a new stage of our lives and we're sort of done with the externalized version of ourselves, the success, the cars, the boats, the money, the fame, and all of that, or even just the pursuit of all that. And we're coming into deeper meaning, deeper spiritual meaning, if you like, deeper connection, intimacy, meaning, legacy, etc. Right? We often forget that because it's so unfamiliar to us, or it has been, it scares us. And so we often avoid it and we just go back to what's familiar. Let's create external success. I'm good at making money, or I'm good at building this. And great, but we forget, this is the thing that we forget, that what was required to build all of those things that you built in the external world, those virtues, if you like, those characteristics, they carry over to this thing that you're now embarking upon. And so the difficulty and the challenge that you've faced in your life, that you've moved through, that you've developed toughness and resilience for, that hopefully you've developed some self-compassion for along the way as well, that it draws a parallel to this new journey that you're on of deeper meaning. It's akin to, hey, I've worked in this industry for 20 years and now I'm going to go to this industry. And there's a carryover of the skills that I've taken in this industry to this industry, even though it's a totally different industry. So the carryover of the characteristics that you've developed and the character that you've developed along the way, it transfers very well into this next phase of your life. And it pays to remember that. So many men forget that and they use that as a very convenient way to avoid actually embarking on this journey of deeper meaning.
I love this. This is so true. So many guys that come into me, they say, Adam, I'm horrible in my marriage and I'm amazing at business. And I tell them it's the same skill set. It's the same skill set. We just need to show you how to run your marriage a little bit more like a business, but not one where it's cutthroat, one where it's actually you're taking care of everybody involved. Let's run your marriage like a business. And boom, it clicks. Once you teach a man to generalize his skills like that, it's phenomenal to see them take off. This has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for coming in today and speaking to this audience. I know that they need to learn more about you. They need to see your Instagram reels because they're very insightful. I love them over there. Please tell everybody where they can find you, and then maybe a resource you have or something that would help them improve their relationships right now because they're hungry for work and for steps to do.
Yeah, thank you, man. Well, firstly, Adam, I've thoroughly enjoyed speaking to you, man. You're a very wise and humble individual, and it's always beautiful just to learn from people that, I've met a new friend. So thank you. I appreciate being on your show, man, and trusting me with your audience as well. Means a lot. I really enjoyed this conversation, this exploration, and the way that you see the world as well. You can find me at Stefanos Safandos on Instagram or pretty much all social media channels. And then at stephanossafandos.com, my website. And there's all my offerings and programs, and you can access my coaching, my one-on-one coaching there as well. But in terms of some offers that can really help you, on my website, if you go to free resources, there's a sacred union process that's for free that my wife and I have done. There's a couple of assessments on masculine and feminine dynamics and polarity, on what your greatest love block is. And then you're put into an email nurture sequence, really, essentially, that gives you more and more information based on the archetype that it spits out and really helps support you in that journey as well. And that's all free information. There's nothing that you need to purchase or do or anything like that. And then we've got courses on inner child level 1, inner child level 2, relationship courses as well, that are all on my website got an amazing course coming up soon, Be the Queen. We've been doing that since 2019. And that's really more for women that are looking for love, but looking for the right kind of love in the right places. And a big part of that 3.5 month transformative journey, with a beautiful in-person graduation at the end of that, is doing our inner work and really healing the past, especially our connections and our relationships to our primary caregivers and our families and so forth. There's a lot of inner child somatic work and trauma release work in that as well. And then, of course, dating dynamics and guidance on that too. So, they're the places that you can find me, and I just appreciate being here again.
I love that. 100 days to be the queen. That's exactly what every lady here on this channel needs. Please be the queen in your life. If you want to find the king, you've got to be the queen. You're not going to get there by being the janitor. So don't be anybody's janitor. Make sure you step up and become the queen in your own life. Spanos, it has been wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much. For everybody at home, thank you for following along. We'll see you on the next one.